This week's episode was brought to you by Evictor Sai and the Servants of Yamraj. Thank you, Evictor Sai and the Servants of Yamraj. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that helps keep the enormous bunny kaiju stocked with carrot-flavored plutonium carrots and generating enough energy to hop rhythmically along a calculated trajectory around the interior of the Earth to help keep its rotational axis tilted at exactly 23.5 degrees as to so prevent the reversal of the magnetic poles, which would disrupt the frozen yogurt distribution market on a mass scale. If you'd like to help keep the frozen yogurt market from crashing, or just hear the second half of this episode, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you the extended version of this episode, but all of our episodes going back to the before times. But not only that, I'll send you a 5x5 sticker of our Big Bunny cover art at no cost to you, and the secret keys to our Discord server, where you can talk about the strange otherworldly experiences you encounter with creators and listeners of the show alike. On this week's episode, we briefly discuss current events regarding UFO disclosure and Kevin Spacey before jumping into a number of great stories about near-death experiences of the distressing variety, which are categorized into 3 distinct types: inverse, the void, and hellish, alongside a number of our own personal encounters with the great beyond, and even the nature of consciousness itself. In the extended episode, we continue sharing NDE stories and compare the ones from America with those of India to explore how they vary between cultures. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Well, my dog smells like Doritos.
He also kind of looks like one.
He does.
So your dog smells like Doritos, and your uncle smells like peanut butter and cigarettes?
Yes.
You put those together, that's like snack time. So if you melted cheese on your dog, it would smell like nachos.
I guess so.
Then he'd be a chili cheese dog.
Oh!
Chili cheese doge?
Then you stick him in a giant bun. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just tell you about the symbolic and otherwise mythological interpretation of hell. Nay, we give detailed accounts about the people who've been there and seen what tortures await us with their own eyes. Well, at least the ones in their astral body, because this week we're discussing the dark side of near-death experiences and the otherworldly terror that awaits the minority of those who have had them. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, also known as Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the canine queen of carrots, Mari-sama.
Salutations, y'all.
The nuclear chaos slumbering at the heart of the cosmos, Malachor 5.
It's actually pretty cold here.
And the tempting tutor of the temple, Heka Astra.
Hello.
So this week, we got a little carried away researching the exact frequency required to vibrate the soul out of a human skull, and decided we needed another week to jackhammer and chainsaw the details into place. So today, we're discussing a little bit of current events, some unscripted banter, and of course, first-hand accounts of the spooky stuff a slim margin of people experience while having near-death experiences. But before we talk about journeying to hell, let's touch on current events. What's going on with the Alamaus?
Well, what's up with the Alamaus?
First of all, why are they called Alamaus?
Aliens.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, as in alien, as in unknown to the planet.
But not unknown to the government. After all, it was just today that David Grusch, a retired U.S. Air Force intelligence officer, testified before Congress about the Pentagon's secret UFO program. According to NBC, Grusch says that he interviewed 40 people over the 4 years he worked investigating UAP phenomena and claims to know the Pentagon operates a program which has access to downed UFOs and actively works to reverse engineer them. He claims to have interviewed people who have removed non-human biological material from UFOs as well. He mentions that the people interviewed are still working in official and classified positions on those projects currently.
It was pretty interesting hearing all these Congress people take this guy's whistleblowing testimony very seriously, and they were asking him, like demanding under oath, like, hey, what are the names of the agencies? Like, who? And he's like, I can't talk about that here. And he's totally in the right to say that because he's still apparently like connected to people and he apparently knows stuff, or at least nobody has said he's a phony. But the fact that they're taking him serious and saying like, hey, you have bodies, that's pretty wild.
You go so far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors.
I actually have experienced somebody reporting this to me myself. My father worked for government contractors for a long time, and he had high security clearance. While he was younger, they actually brought him out to, it was like Pikes Peak, and I think that's out west somewhere. Is it in New Mexico? Anyway, it's somewhere out in the desert, pretty in close proximity to Area 51, where he was supposed to undergo some training and research. And he told me this story. He didn't really mention anything about the specifics, but later on he mentioned that he had seen downed crafts. He had seen them with his own eyes. He was told to look at it and reverse engineer certain mechanisms on the craft. And at some point, I asked him, have you seen an alien before? And he wouldn't answer me. And then he also had this proclivity to go to these, the weird UFO groups that discuss like abductions and like what craft they've seen and all this new age stuff about aliens. He would constantly go to these groups. He kind of played it off like he was like seeing what they were saying and kind of making fun of them. But I think that he was like trying to monitor what everyone else was thinking about the things that he had seen. And he was sworn by secrecy, like he couldn't tell anybody because he was under the security clearance. But he had hinted to me many times. He even called himself an alien. It's a funny joke, but who knows what that man have seen working for the government and building them. He built missile systems and stuff like that. He worked on the space shuttle at one point. So, and he was in the Air Force, so probably had seen some things himself. So I believe this entire, all of the whistleblowers, I totally believe them.
Now, the Pentagon is like, no, we don't have downed spaceships and dead aliens, so that would never happen. We would never do that and lie about it. And so they accuse him of being a liar.
Yeah, Bob Lazar has also talked about observing these crafts before, and people also try to defame him, and they pick through his arguments and figure out, oh, well, he's lying here and there, but we don't really know. But these guys were under oath, so I'm assuming that they were telling the truth.
Yeah, they can go to prison if they're lying.
I think the way that this kind of stuff works is it very rarely would you have one person involved that knows absolutely everything about a specific project. So when they're like, well, he didn't know these things or these things, so obviously there's holes in his story. It's like, no, they just have those people focus on these particular things. It's a need to know basis with high clearance projects.
Yeah, it's compartmentalization. So if you lose an asset, if someone squeals, they're not telling the whole story.
And this isn't just with, UAP stuff. This is with all levels of government stuff. It's like the higher the clearance, the higher the need to know basis is. Normally for me, I think anybody who knows me on a personal basis knows I'm generally not inclined to look into this kind of stuff, and it weirds me out. Aliens freak me out. So I don't really care much for the topic. The only way that I actually heard about this was from a behavioral arts channel that I follow on YouTube, where they analyze people's micro movements, microfacial movements, body language, that kind of stuff. So it was a behavioral analysis movie that I saw this particular whistleblower and his interview and his actual expressions and body language being analyzed.
You mean David Grusch?
Yes, the two YouTube channels that I watch in regards to behavior analysis is the Behavior Panel and Behavioral Arts. Those are the two ones. The one that I watched this on is Behavioral Arts, and it was really fascinating because he was pointing out, anytime you do a behavioral analysis, you look at a baseline that the person has first, right? So you can see what their body language is like prior to asking them questions and seeing what the body language response is to those. And so he did give us a baseline coming in with the introduction, talking about himself growing up and stuff. And that gives these behavior analysts a good baseline to go off of to make their analysis on. I fully suggest going and watching these videos yourself. But the gist of it is that generally there's not a lot of signs of deception that he was throwing down. There was nothing nothing that like very clearly pointed to deception. There were signs of search for social approval, like a genuine, you're probably not going to believe what I'm saying kind of feel going on, but no entire red flags of this person is lying or deceiving, which I thought was really interesting.
I also noticed too, when they pressed him to tell him the agencies that had silenced these people and him, you could see that he was recollecting and he had the answer and it was trying to come out of his mouth, but he had to stop himself and say, I can't say that because there's going to be legal trouble if he does.
There were definite signs too of like him being uncomfortable with not knowing a specific answer because like I just pointed out earlier, like not everybody has every piece of information. So with him not being able to give certain pieces of information, he was obviously uncomfortable.
According to his own testimony, he himself has never seen a UAP, but it appears that he genuinely believes the 40 people that he has interviewed. And they probably are saying enough of the same thing that's lining up to give him confidence in what he's saying. So, long story short, it seems likely the Pentagon and super top secret stuff in the government not only has UFOs, they're reverse engineering them, and they have dead alien bodies somewhere on ice. Do they go to hell or not? I don't know. What if they're from hell? Has anyone considered that? The evangelical Christians have. I tend to think it's somewhere in the middle. What if they're like spirits from the other world, and that's how they fly around in our world? Because that way it would allow the Pentagon to not be lying when they say, well, they're not extraterrestrial in origin, because they actually live here, either underwater or in another dimension. They're just locals, you know? They're just peeking over the fence and being like, what you doing, little mammal creature?
Howdy ho, neighborino.
Exactly. Speaking of bloodthirsty aliens, I hear Kevin Spacey was acquitted.
Lame.
Yeah, nothing fishy to look at there.
Yeah, it's not like he was ever written down on the flight logs to Epstein Island on the Lolita Express or anything. You know, that's a moot point.
Yeah, or hanging with Ghislaine Maxwell. That's just not related at all.
That picture of him with the royal family, that's not real. That's a deep fake, you guys.
Listen, Ghislaine Maxwell is the only guilty person in the whole world. So that's why she's the only one that's been arrested and tried for any crimes. It's because everyone else is innocent.
It's not a relevant point, apparently.
Yeah, Kevin Spacey, he is the truth in the way.
Someone somewhere was just too big of a fan of, is it House of Cards?
Yeah, they took him off the show because they're like,
Ooh.
you're creepy, dude.
I saw a really good comment about it. It was like, there's no way that there can be justice in court when there's an actor present.
A bad actor, right?
He's like,
he's actually a really good actor.
Yeah.
I know, unfortunately. Do you guys remember that like weird Christmas video short that he put out like after all of these allegations started coming out?
I do.
And he would just stare at the camera with like a mug of coffee in the kitchen while other people are like waiting for the meal to be served. And it's like maybe Christmas or Thanksgiving. And he's like in the kitchen, like preparing the food and just talking to the camera like,
I know what you want. Oh, sure, they may have tried to separate us, but what we have is too strong. It's too powerful. I mean, after all, we shared everything, you and I. I told you my deepest, darkest secrets. I showed you exactly what people are capable of. I shocked you with my honesty, but mostly I challenged you and made you think. And you trusted me, even though you knew you shouldn't.
What? I've never seen this.
it's creepy as fuck. And yes, he is a good actor, but I think that he acts in his normal life.
Well, prior to the trial, it's pretty well known that Spacey likes to exclude his personal life and his personal preferences and just focus on work, unless he's touching your penis.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Hey, touching penises is work too.
That's why they call it a blow job, because you're doing something good for the economy.
Yeah, it was called Let Me Be Frank, and I will link it in the notes.
I just hovered my cursor over the link that Mari put, and that is a terrifying face.
He's so scary in it, dude. It's like, that's the closest to the real Kevin Spacey you're ever going to see.
How much is a near-death experience in this economy?
Priceless.
So let's get into the NDEs. Much to my delight, the term near-death experience was first used by John C. Lilly, the ketamine-loving eccentric who invented the Lilly tank, or, as it's more widely known, the sensory deprivation chamber. The same guy who flooded his scientific lab to cohabitate with dolphins to better understand how they communicate.
They use sound.
It's a dolphin guy.
I love that guy, except it was kind of fucked up what happened.
This guy took so much ketamine, he became convinced that there were extra-dimensional entities that presided over all the synchronicities in the universe, and their name was Echo. So naturally, he's also the inspiration for Echo the dolphin.
Drugs and dolphins, drugs and dolphins.
And aliens.
What that blowhole do?
It's a job.
It's a job. That's his job specifically. However, the term near-death experience was actually popularized widely by Raymond Moody, who studied and documented numerous cases of people who had experienced death and come back to tell us what they saw. He's actually friends with my mom, strangely enough. When I saw his name, I was like, oh, it's Raymond.
Cool.
Wow, that's cool.
That's because your mom's a death specialist, right?
Yes, she was a pioneer in conscious dying, which is basically what Dr. Sleep does in the movie, where he helps people die consciously and come to grips with it. But when you tell people you're a death specialist, they look at you funny, and
Dude, she would have been great to have on here.
we could still have her on someday.
Well, a lot of people that work in healthcare, they actually see this happen firsthand, but they never get interviewed or write it down or tell it to the authorities.
You're right. It's not particularly uncommon. Now, as you may already know, near-death experiences are intense, personal experiences which occur immediately before, during, or even after death, which may encompass a variety of sensations, usually detachment from the body, feelings of levitation, total serenity, security, warmth, and the experience of absolute disillusion, mixed usually also with the presence of light. All symptoms of taking enough ketamine, should be worth noting.
Generally sounds very pleasant.
Yes, near-death experiences are generally pleasant, and the people who come back from them come back changed for the positive.
And even while in their vision, they have that such an overwhelming sense of warmth and acceptance and love. They don't want to go back into their body that has pain in it. They always will express that, and they usually will come back to their body if there's unfinished business or like children or people that rely on them in everyday life, and they come back with a message and a way to change themselves.
Or they're told it's not their time.
Yes, that too, that happens. And even by not only spirits, but figments of gods, but also passing souls, people that have passed away already will come back and tell them this.
But we're not going to talk about the light and fluffy stuff as much today, because just like drugs, you can also have a bad trip, apparently, right?
No! Yes.
Yeah.
The death trip.
A bad death trip.
I have had one of these experiences before, and I just saw like a bunch of blackness, and eventually like this red star. Like I just was like, it felt like I was probably traveling in some sort of void of darkness. Eventually got to this giant red star, and I went through it, and then I came back, and I was in the hospital.
Malachor is a reptilian confirmed.
I'm a kaiju, so my kaiju soul went to kaiju void place. But I did feel like I came back with like this profound message of like, yeah, we are kind of all one. Like the stuff I heard in that experience was like at the soul level, it felt, and like it changed me. It was like a swap of, it's like a clean, like a bath, fire bath. It was awesome. And there's a Dr. Eben Alexander who wrote some books. He's a neurosurgeon, so his whole life is based on like logic, and these experiences aren't possible. But then he got really sick and he went into a coma, and the books he wrote are called Living in a Mindful Universe, Proof of Heaven, and The Map of Heaven. And his near-death experience resulted in him coming to the conclusion that consciousness is not in the brain, because he was still the same person there, and he came back to retain his neurosurgeon mind and like this new profound, like, no, consciousness isn't about what's in the brain, and he's a neurosurgeon, so it just broke his whole world apart.
And that's fascinating to me too, because a lot of people come to this conclusion that consciousness is somehow external and is eternal in that regard. Like if your body dies, then it has to go somewhere. But another interesting thing about that, for like neurosurgeons notice this a lot more, like surgeons in general, because if you have an organ transplant into a body from a separate body, a lot of times there will be some weird spiritual experiences experienced by the person that took in the new organ, because the physical manifestation of a body tissue actually has a fine-tuned, like the cells are tuned in like an antenna to a global consciousness ether. And these people often describe like, oh, well, I have like this walk-in personality, or sometimes I don't act like myself. So there's a lot to what he's saying, because a lot of other scientists have also reported the same thing, is that we're more like tuned to be like antennas with like we're like a tool set or a mechanical being that the consciousness can beam down into through the antennas on the cells. And that's what produces an ego or a person.
Far out.
Liquid Snake.
Yeah, Luke's right. That's pretty much what happens with Liquid Snake and Ocelot in Metal Gear Solid.
Like, Ocelot gets Liquid Snake's arm, and then suddenly Liquid Snake is like taking over his personality and possessing him at different times.
Right. It's like a reverse phantom limb, right? It's like you're gaining a limb, but it didn't belong to you. So now your whole brain is
Absolutely.
your consciousness is like, hey, what's up? Like, see, like the consciousness of this old soul is in this organ. Just because it's not a brain doesn't mean shit. Like, you're talking to my spleen now or whatever.
It does. It gives a whole new perspective to consciousness itself. And it even vilifies people that have multiple personalities or split personality disorder. Like, they claim that they have different personalities in their body. And now we might have to believe them because we could just be an antenna for consciousness and personality to come in to the body.
Well, as we learned in the extended episode of our last show, the physical body, or Ka, is an extension or a manifestation of our Ka, our spiritual essence, as Heka taught us.
I like to think of it as your brain is just this uniquely shaped vessel, like a vase that you are pouring the water of consciousness into. And the shape of that vase is like basically your neural pathways, your experiences that get stored as memories, like the things that shape what you generally think to be who you are. That ego is just the shape of the vase, and the consciousness is what is poured into it.
We're like universal and stuff, but then we get poured into our brain, and then we're us with all our limitations and preferences and cravings. And this makes sense to me because from what I understand, a lot of what the brain does is filter stuff out. So when we take psychedelic drugs or whatever, it allows some of those filters to kind of fade away or turn off or be put to sleep so that we experience more of the unfiltered consciousness. And so that's like what you're saying with the brain being a vessel for the universal consciousness. And we filter out the universality and we're stuck just being in the vessel, you could say.
You could take the filter away or put it back as you please if you practice, but near-death experiences and even some out-of-body experiences are witnessing the filter be completely removed at some points. And
Right.
also you experience that with psychedelics and any kind of like out-of-body state.
You can't. It's like if the water was getting poured back out of the jar, but it kept the shape of the jar, you can keep like your personality with you, or it can not come with you. It's not set in stone. It depends on the experience.
Yeah, and how strongly it manifests those patterns, right?
Now, synchronistically, you had a bit of an experience of this variety while we were writing the show, didn't you, Heka?
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to be talking about other experiences that I've had. And then on the 24th, I had an experience which was I was waking up in the morning and it was like a series of waking ups. So I can't necessarily say that I was dreaming per se because I kept on looking over at the clock. And I definitely wasn't still in a state of like deep sleep dreaming. It was more like being in a state past dreaming, if that makes sense. This is how I wrote it down in my journal. I joined a stream of light that I have no other words to describe other than beautiful. It was a constant stream that I was a part of, but in saying that I was a part of it, the I or me was not me as I think of me. It was just my consciousness, no hint of my body or shape or personality at all. I was just light in light. I was still aware of my personality, but I was not bound to it. And I had the understanding that I had left my personality behind. And what I was experiencing was amazing and beautiful, but that doesn't even do it justice to explain it. I experienced being part of this continuous stream of light for what felt like hours. When I woke up or opened my eyes again, I thought it was much too early to get up when I looked at the clock. So I closed my eyes and slipped right back into the stream of light. This happened several times, like several more times, where it felt like I was in this stream for many hours, but when I'd wake up, only 2 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes had gone by. It was a total time inconsistency between the physical and the conscious. And it made me consider how our brains are more like the jars that consciousness is poured into. I really think that the shape that the consciousness takes, which is like water or light being poured into it really is just somatic memories, neural pathways, and the functions of the brain. So the shape that it takes is not the consciousness itself, I guess is what I'm saying. And in that experience, I felt really happy to be unbound and freed of my own personality. Like it felt like a relief. Then I wrote further, upon waking, I understood more about how consciousness forms matter. It isn't the matter. The brain is formed by the consciousness and receives it, but it isn't the source of the consciousness itself. It's a result of it.
This makes some esoteric sense. It reminds me in Buddhism how you want to find, quote, the ground of all being or existence, and that's what the ground is described as. And also in Thelema, there's this core idea of when you cross the abyss, you have to pour all the blood of the saints, that being your personality and everything that's associated with it, into the cup of Babylon. And then you get to experience the unfiltered light of the divine, which, you know, to be edgelordy, they call Pan, the light of Pan, the light of the all, you could say.
I think there's also a lesson that's related to this in the headless ritual or the bornless ritual, whatever you might want to say are both correct. It's this whole idea of what does the head represent and removing that from the things that the body represents. And it's a lot like we've been talking about for the past few minutes. It's like, you know, parts of yourself do different things and they're all tuned to different parts of the universe maybe, and their function just scaled in a different way in the universe. You know, how does the universe run? How does a human run? It's just different things. We need water on this planet. The world we know works in a certain way. We work in a certain way. You know, we can look at things like their heads and their organs and body parts separately. Just different lenses we have to look through.
I was really grateful to have this experience personally. It's kind of funny though, because a lot of synchronous 333s I've been getting every single day for leading up to this.
And that's Coronzone's number, the Lord of the Abyss. So this whole crossing, this void area, it's making sense to the Thelemite in me.
Now, while most near-death experiences usually feature quite a bit of the material that Heka just mentioned in her dream of sorts, there's a minority of experiencers who come across things that are genuinely terrifying. These are what we call distressing near-death experiences. According to Nancy Evans Bush, the president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and Bruce Grayson, MD, distressing near-death experiences fall into 3 different categories: inverse, void, and hellish. All perfect names for difficulty levels in old-timey DOS games, if you ask me.
Or Diablo 4.
Yes. It also seems worth mentioning that Bush and Grayson are big names in the near-death experience scene. Now, to look at the first category, inverse near-death experiences are composed of elements classically attributed to positive NDEs: flying, meeting entities, being drawn towards the light, but the subjective experience of these features are felt as ominous or terrifying. One example comes from a fellow who suffered a post-operative infection following a surgery for an aneurysm at age 64. He was having a bad time. He also had never heard of near-death experiences and initially only told his wife because he didn't think anyone else would even know what to do with that information. According to him, it went as thus: "As I looked under me, a strong wind was pulling me into what seemed to be a funnel shaped like a cornucopia, only it was opened at both ends. I was flying and drawn directly into the vortex or tunnel. At the end, the lights were blinding, and a crystal flashing was unbearable. As I neared the very end, I was reaching for the sides, trying to stop myself from falling off the end and into the flashing crystal. I felt that I did not want to go on. If there was some way I could explain to you what happened. I vividly remember screaming, 'God, I'm not ready! Please help me!' As I write this letter, I'm reliving it. I remember when I screamed, an arm shot out of the sky and grabbed my hand, and at the last second, I was kept from falling out of the end of the tunnel. The lights flashing, and the heat was really something." So he got pulled into the Fruit of the Loom logo.
No, as soon as you said cornucopia, I was like, oh no.
It's all his fault.
Man, that sounds panic-inducing.
Now that I'm rereading it, it seems worth mentioning that precious stones and cornucopias were both related to Hades in the ancient world, the lord of the underworld and of death. So maybe he's not the only one that got sucked into a giant flashing crystal at the end of a cornucopia when he died.
Oh, yeah.
The next example is from an anonymous source published by J. Martell in a June 20th, 2020 edition of The New Yorker. It says, "In the ambulance, my heart stopped beating for 3 minutes. And during that time, I found myself walking through a beautiful garden with a sparkling brook running through it. On the other side of a bridge stood Jesus and all his disciples, smiling beatifically. Jesus said something to me which I assumed was an invitation to cross the bridge, but when I set foot on it, he said, "No, can't you read?" And it was then that I looked down and saw a sign on the bridge that read, "Apostles Only." Jesus pointed downstream where a log lay across the brook. I nodded, walked to the log, and tried to cross, but the log was deceptively slippery. Each time I got about halfway across, I fell into the brook, and each time, Jesus and the apostles laughed. It wasn't malicious laughter, it was just an expression of delight, but still, I couldn't help but take it personally. When I got back to life in the ER, I felt hurt and confused.
Oh, no.
It's the Joker Jesus.
Oh, man.
I mean, to be fair, maybe even Jesus would find it funny that you get halfway through a brook, and instead of just crossing by wading across, you go back to the beginning and try again. I mean, who wouldn't laugh at that?
Yeah. Also, I find a lot of times the universe itself has a sense of humor, and I kind of just feel like this is some abstract vision of that sense of humor that the universe has.
What if he was trying to tell the dude that he was an apostle, and the guy was just not giving his own self enough credit and went over to the log, and the log clearly wasn't for him, and he just never realized?
He's like, of like the seven dwarves, he's like Dopey the apostle.
Now, for me personally, I have a bit of an NDE story, but I have to rely on my mom's memory, who wrote it down. I was 3 years old, and I know Mari's gonna yuck at this, but I had Coxsackie virus. And apparently I got really sick. I had a high fever, which isn't unusual. And my mom was talking on the phone with a friend, and she had like that mom intuition, like with the bunnies on the Soviet submarine. And she's like, "Oh my God, my son is in danger." She sounded just like Batman. And then she ran into the bedroom, and I was like not breathing. And she was like, "Huh, good thing I'm a nurse," and began to resuscitate me. She was successful, of course, as I'm here telling this story today. But afterwards, I was like this weird little 3-year-old kid ranting and raving about this tunnel of light that I went through, that I saw the quote electric hand man, and I said that he had this ray of light that beamed out of his palms, and the ray of light didn't bend around the world, it just went straight into infinity. I guess I didn't know that that's what light does. If you had a long enough laser, it would do that. But nonetheless, I said that all the evil bowed before this light, and that I saw my mom as this great dragon who was breathing sparks into me. And after that, I woke up. And then afterwards, I would sit on the piano and play incoherent piano notes, singing about the electric hand man badly. And so
that's adorable.
Well, at the time, I really wanted Electric Hand Man to be also a Power Ranger, and I was really into like being the Electric Hand Man. The problem is like I would always God mode. I was like, Electric Hand Man can't die. He has infinite power. It's bad Superman role playing. So anyway, that was the NDE experience that I've been informed that I had when I was young.
That's really cool and interesting.
Why, thank you. And thanks, Mom, for resuscitating me.
Yes. I'm glad that you're still here today and not here as just a ghost.
I personally don't remember the NDE, but I do remember being so sick with Coxsackie virus that I could not walk. It was like every time I extended my legs, the pain was so great, I had to like crawl to the restroom, and like I still remember that. So it was bad.
Do you remember like playing as Electric Hand Man?
Oh yeah, I was obsessed. I had this red pair of gloves, and these red pair of gloves or mittens, they had like these white zigzags along the palm, and I was like, this is the Electric Hand Man gloves. I was obsessed with this. I do remember that.
Sounds like some David Lynch character now.
Well, I think that's cool that you remember like role-playing Electric Hand Man, even if you can't remember Electric Hand Man.
Maybe that's why I like my Diablo character so much. Anyway, the following story comes from a paramedic instructor who was familiar with NDEs, having listened to several of her patients' accounts. Like I said, it's not terribly uncommon. The following, however, is an experience she had during a bout of measles at the age of 6.
I was going to suggest that Mari reads it, but if she's not responsive.
Mari!
She's having a near Doge experience.
Woof, woof.
If we talk about sniffing butts, will she come back?
I'm trying to sniff at the microphone and it's not working.
Okay, Hecka, you do it.
Okay. That night, I was picked up unwillingly by a lady wearing a long green flowing robe, medieval style. She carried me in her arms down a long, dark, green, moldy type, dirt-wailed tunnel, swiftly taking me somewhere I did not want to go. She mind talked to me and kept trying to explain that I had to go and nothing could prevent it, no matter how much I didn't want to leave. I think that was why she was carrying me, for I know I would have run back down the tunnel otherwise. Suddenly she heard bells bonging from very, very far away. She stopped and turned to listen. She told me there had been a change and I had to go back after all. She had no compassion during all of this, simply a formal, strong approach towards me. Then she carried me back to my bed and placed me on it, still drawn up in a contracted bundle from being carried for so long. I called out to her, but she rapidly walked away into the tunnel. When my mother rushed in and heard my jabbering story, which scared me more than any dream, she became terrified due to my fragile condition.
What I love about that story in particular is how it echoes one of the features of Clive Barker's novel that got turned into Hellraiser. When you solve the box right before the Cenobites come, in the film you can hear like distant bells, but there's a song that plays when you open the box that Clive Barker describes as a rondo of sublime banality, which, man, that's spooky. Get some old medieval green dress lady taking you through to the other world as some creepy bells play. This is the first category, inverse near-death experiences, where it's the same kind of stuff that happens in the positive near-death experiences, but it's perceived as negative, horrifying, and ominous. So that's why they're called inverse. Arguably, this second category is maybe the most terrifying. A near-death experience of the void is an ontological encounter with a perceived vast emptiness, often a devastating scenario of aloneness, isolation, and even sometimes annihilation. Often, there is a paradoxical sensation of ceasing to exist entirely, or of being condemned to a featureless void for eternity, which also paradoxically is host to beings who inform the experiencer that they never existed, and even worse, life itself was merely imagined. Often, as is typical of this sort of NDE, the experiencer replies to these claims with logical arguments to the contrary.
This sounds actually kind of lovely to me.
It's like there's people squatting in the void.
Yeah.
I've heard a personal account from a friend that their boyfriend had loaded them up with way too much heroin, and she could see it in the needle before it went into her arm. Like, she was like, that's way too much. And before she could say anything, he like into her system, and she just remembers everything going black. But what she told me is that this blackness she existed in was like peaceful and perfect, and she wished she could have stayed there forever. So even experiences of the void can be positive. It just so happens that for some people, they're a bit negative. Our first example of this category comes from an academic administrator who, although a child of two Unitarian ministers, had never heard of NDEs and also believed she was the only person to have ever had one. As fate would have it, her harrowing experience would come during the birth of her second child at the age of 28. When she went into labor 3 weeks early, just like me, she was sent to the hospital where 3 Pitokin drips were administered for the next 7 hours. I don't know what Pitokin is, but it might have played a role in what happened. Describing her mental state as fearful, depressed, and panicky, the doctors opted to give her a mask of nitrous oxide, also known as
laughing gas
or hippie crack, depending on the setting. Wah, 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 wah. When she explained the experience, she wrote,
I remember trying to fight the mask, but they grabbed my wrist and strapped them. First, there was only unconsciousness, but at some point, farther into delivery, my blood pressure suddenly dropped. I was aware, not of the flurry around me, but of moving rapidly upward into darkness. Although I don't recall turning to look, I knew the hospital and the world were receding below me. To this day, my mind holds a sharp picture of them down there. Though I don't know how I could so clearly have seen something I didn't look at. I was rocketing through space like an astronaut without a capsule, with immense speed and great distance. A small group of circles appeared ahead of me, some tending toward the left. To the right was just a dark space. The circles were black and white, and making a clicking sound as they snapped black to white, white to black. They were jeering and tormenting. Not evil exactly, but more mocking and mechanistic. The message in their clicking was, your life never existed. The world never existed. Your family never existed. You were allowed to imagine it. You were allowed to make it up. It was never there. There is nothing here. There was never anything there. That's the joke. It was all a joke. There was much laughter on their parts. Malicious. I remember brilliant argumentation on my part, trying to prove that the world and I existed. I recall arguing that I knew the details of my mother's life before my birth, things about her childhood in another part of the country. How could I have made that up? And my first baby, I knew her. I knew I hadn't made her up. And childbirth, why would I ever have made that up? They just kept jeering.
This is eternity,
They said. They kept mocking.
this is all there ever was, and all there ever will be.
Just this despair. It was empty, except for me and them, and dark. Not like night dark somehow. It was thinner, whatever that means. It was very dark and immense all around, but somehow I could see them. The voidness seemed to thin out somewhere off by the horizon, if there had been a horizon, but it wasn't lighter, just thinner. It seemed to go on forever. I was debating and simultaneously grieving for my first baby, and this baby that was never going to get born, and for my mother. That utter emptiness just went on, and they kept on clicking. I was trying to summon up some strong memory of my husband and the house, something tangible to argue with, thinking I couldn't bear this for eternity. The grief was just wrenching. This world gone, and grass, and my first baby, and all the other babies, and hills. I knew no one could bear that much grief, but there didn't seem to be any end of it, and no way out. Everyone I loved was gone. Time was forever, endless rather than all at once. The remembering of events had no sense of life review, but of trying to prove existence, that existence existed. Yes, it was more than real, absolute reality. There's a cosmic terror we have never addressed. The despair was because of the absolute conviction that I had seen what the other side was. I never thought of it as hell, and there was no way to tell anyone. It wouldn't matter how I died or when. Damnation was out there, just waiting. 6 years later, I was leafing through a book. It may have been Jung's Man and His Symbols, and I turned a page to discover a picture of one of the circles. The book landed across the room in one shutter. That was terror. It was corroboration. Someone else knew about the circles. There would be no way I could any longer pretend that they were imaginary. It would be several more years before I learned that the circles were the yin-yang of the Eastern tradition. Their sound had been the black and white sides clicking to the opposite and back again.
Whoa.
Dude, that's an intense experience.
I feel a little bad her first knowledge of the yin yang was them mocking her, but it sounds kind of on brand.
Yeah.
Like, oh, silly little human, none of this is real.
What about my family and my job and my bank account? This has to be real.
That it's funny. In one of the Rick and Morty episodes, they're like looking at a simulated game world, and this guy almost dies, and then he goes back to work. And then Rick's like, and then when he finally dies, he's like, yeah, he was a fucking idiot. Like, he almost dies, and he doesn't go and have fun with his life. He goes back to his boring ass job. Like, it's like you're like, you know, in the afterlife, like, oh no, what's gonna happen? And it's like, what are you gonna do now? Like, can't go back. I guess that's Rick's tone about it.
What I like about this story is that it has a lot of the things in it that I experienced very briefly during my theophany, and specifically my experience of the Sophia. I was a little bit inebriated, of course, but not more inebriated than I had been recently. And so the experience to me was spontaneous and not necessarily drug-induced. I had the bright idea to just call out to Sophia, like on a whim. It was the same whim I felt driving home one day when this inner voice said, you need to read Philip K. Dick's Valis, like just out of nowhere. And I listened to the whole thing and I really loved it. And then, you know, fast forward to my theophany when I called out to Sophia, I felt the immense love of this transcendental presence of the divine, this infinitely benevolent and loving personality that seemed to be female. Do I even dare say like a younger female kind of energy? And she rained down fiery kisses upon me. And it went for a while until she showed me infinity, which seemed to be her light or her love, which at the time seemed obviously to penetrate everything forever in all directions, unendingly, unlimitedly, with nothing else being beyond it. And that sense of nothing else being beyond this infinite love was so incredibly comforting to me that whatever seed I had of doubt in terms of the ontological ground nature of reality was completely exterminated. Like, to this day, I still don't have any doubt about, quote unquote, what the truth is, despite my human capacity to recognize that everything is subjective and everyone has their own truth. But for me, like, because of that experience, I feel strongly in saying that I know there is nothing beyond that light, and there's nothing more powerful. There's nothing beyond it. That is the ultimate level of reality. And what's funny to me is that, like, man, other people can experience that too, but it's like negative. Like, you know, like there's this void. She described it as blackness. I didn't really see a color, really. I imagine it was a lot like how Kabbalists would think of the Ein Sof, or the Ein Sof Ire, or even the Ein. But like, you know, this lady's out here seeing the void, and it like sucks, you know. And is that because in that moment she was going through childbirth and like she had the strong, intense obligation to bring another life into material, and because of that, like, her experience was negative? Like, if she had been an old lady or really sick and was ready to die, would she have had the same experience that I had? I tend to think probably. I tend to think that, like, when you go to that world or you see the infinity, depending on where you are at that moment, it could color your perception of it or how much you're clinging to your personality. It's like, it's really easy to imagine a bunch of ascended beings or angels or consciousness manifesting as yin-yangs being like, no, no, no. You know what I mean? Like, none of that's real. Don't cling to it. It's all BS. And then if you cling to it, you're like, you know, stuck on a lonely island in the middle of nowhere being like, but my kids. You know, like, it makes sense to me.
A little similar to my experience, because I was in the void and like I had to start hearing things that guided me to see a red dot in this void, and I traveled to it, right? And like maybe this is me coming down to Yabura from Bina. You know, I was in this black circle and I had to like use the chariot to get down there.
That makes sense.
I'm just making this up now. That's how I'm perceiving this, you know. Maybe these two black and white dots might be close to that limit point where like it encompasses all of the source of everything, and you can't really do pull-ups on Kether, you know. You just get sucked up into it once you try to do that, once you grasp anything part of it, right? But maybe there's like meditations to these dots in these weird spaces, you know, you're focusing on different spheres of the tree of life. That's what I'm talking about. And they actually do have angel associations. And that's kind of far out, given what you just said, that they're talking and they're joking. It's like two angels were joking with each other, trying to get you to cross or deal with your situation.
I think the concept of absolute nothingness and like how it feels to you is like a very subjective experience. I think some people would find it absolutely horrifying, and I think other people would find it very reassuring.
So from a human perspective, obviously very horrifying if you're in a body. Now, if you believe in space, I tend to believe in space. And I also tend to believe that there are people who've been to orbit and have been on the space station, etc. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's all a psyop, but let's pretend it's not for a minute. If you're in space, right, and you're working on a satellite, you're doing extravehicular activity, you got like your wrench and you're tightening stuff and fixing stuff, and then let's say you drop your wrench and it just very slowly starts to like float away from you. You go out to grab it and you notice that your little tether to your spacecraft came unhooked, and you are now just slightly out of reach of your spacecraft. Because there's no air to swim against and you didn't bring your jetpack, because you can't reach your tether or the spacecraft, you're now stuck forever. Because there's no way for you to get back to your spacecraft. There's no way to swim. There's no way to like propel yourself. Unless you had an object to throw in the opposite direction and use Newton's law, you are now floating in the empty void of space forever and ever and ever. I personally can't think of anything more terrifying.
You can't throw your wrench that you went and reached for? It's not enough.
If you could
math,
grab
right?
your wrench and throw it in the opposite direction, and you're not drifting that fast away from your spacecraft, it is likely that you'd be able to push yourself back to the spacecraft, because the wrench would exert enough force against you as you threw it in the opposite direction, you'd like gently float back to your spacecraft. Yeah, that's true.
So when you're taking your wrench out there, take your slingshot, because then you could probably just...
Yes.
I mean, maybe I'm the odd one out on this, but I would dare say that there are people who would think that that is the best way to die.
Oh, possibly.
Just swimming in the absolute nothingness of the universe as part of it. So, like, I still think that's a subjective experience.
I wouldn't want to die like that.
I think I wouldn't mind.
But if you'd like to hear more tales about being suspended indefinitely in the void for all eternity, including some near-death experiences from India, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you the extended edition of this show, but the extended edition of all of our episodes going back multiple years into the before time, which more than doubles the Whole Rabbit content available for you to binge. But not only that, I'll send you a 5x5 high quality vinyl sticker of our cover art, even if you live in Europe or somewhere, and you'll instantaneously be given the keys to our super duper secret Discord server, where you can talk about your near-death experiences, or just that one strange dream you had, without being mocked by your coworkers. We hope to see you there. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, pew, pew.